Hi everyone, Ray Poynter here, and thank you for joining the Festival of NewMR for Trending Tuesday. So with that, it brings us to our super panel. We've got Melanie Courtright from Donata. Hi Melanie.
Hello everyone.
Lenny Murphy from Green Book and Other Places.
Yeah, too many to mention. Hi everybody, thanks for having me, Ray.
And Lucy Davison from Kia in the UK.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Super. And with this today, each of us has brought along something that we want to talk about, and then the others on the panel are going to kick in. And I'm going to start the ball rolling with chatbots, because I think chatbots are the hottest trend at the moment. I think that they are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger over the next 2 to 3 years. They're going to get more effective and more capable as we move forward. So why do I think that? Well, if we look back at the other big changes, what has actually made a difference to market research? Internet data collection. That was a massive change. The rise of panels was a massive change. Mobile in quantitative data wasn't really a massive change. What we did was we made mobile work for what we wanted to do with online. It has been a massive change in qualitative, and the rise of video is a pretty big change too. And I think that chatbots are going to be as big as some of those. They're changing the way that we're doing the discourse. And one of the factors behind that is that chatbots are really big in the real world. When you go online to buy things, when you go to find out about services, increasingly that communication is via chatbot. We're using chatbots elsewhere. They're a more natural interface. Maybe those chatbots will use voice. I suspect that will be a minority case. I think most of it will be text-based, because there are so many places around where you can't use voice. You can't use it in the office. You can't use it on the couch watching the TV when everybody else is watching the TV. You can't use it on the train or places like that, but you can use the text interface. It's going to have some interesting implications because the data won't be the same, and it's allowing us to focus much more on the respondent perspective. So my assertion is the hottest trend this year is going to be chatbots. I don't know if anybody else on the panel would like to agree or disagree with that.
Hi, this is Mel. I agree that chatbots are interesting, and we're seeing more and more questions about them. I think that this will be a year where we start to make some progress in chatbots, but I don't know if they're going to get to any type of mainstream personally. And my reason for thinking that is that some of the interactions with the chatbots are still not conversational enough, and that chatbots are often missing context. And so when consumers engage with chatbots, they can go well, but they can also go very, very wrong. I can hear myself screaming at Siri and at Google that they're stupid, because they just aren't understanding my question, or they're not understanding my answer. And so I think we still have some room to go before they become mainstream, but I do think that they're going to be continue to evolve and become more popular in our space.
Yeah, I'm going to jump back in and then invite Lenny and Lucy to come in, but chatbots shouldn't be dismissed because they're not where they're going to be. If we compare them with the really poor surveys that are out there, they're already a contender for so many bad surveys, the sort of things that people send to you. So if we take that as the starting point, they are already in a position to be better and more engaging than those. So if somebody is using, with no training, a Survey Monkey, they probably have a better idea about how to design a chat survey, which after all is discussion. We're all doing discussions, than they do in how to design a classic survey.
Can I ask a question, Ray?
Just assume yes.
So I think it's interesting when chatbots are more like avatars, and you feel like you're actually engaging with a real person, and maybe there's an image or something with that. Do you have any data that supports the increased engagement you can get from a simple kind of typing into a box conversation to a really quite sophisticated, almost like being interviewed by a robot. Do you have any data on that?
Ray?
Yes, sorry, I'd got the mute button pressed. Sorry. So the only data I've seen so far is comparing a regular survey with a relatively boring chatbot gives a massive uplift in engagement for most people and some really strong alienation for a few.
Yeah.
So a lot of people say, oh, this is a lot easier. It felt like a conversation. Other people going, it was stupid. I could tell it was just a computer. It didn't follow my prompts properly, and they got angry. And some sort of ability to switch between the two, I've not seen anything very good yet data-wise on comparing an average chatbot with a really good one. And I suspect the way to do that would be probably to have at the moment, would be comparing something that claimed to be a chatbot but was actually a human, and then compare that with something that was a chatbot. Because that is where we want to be, when you potentially couldn't tell it was human.
But
so they passed the Turing test, huh?
Yeah, I think that is where people think it needs to be, and I don't think it does. I think that would be better, but not necessary.
We know the interesting about this tech is it's actually it's old tech. So as we're thinking about this, one of my early roles in the research industry many moons ago was working with a company called Dialtech, which was all IVR. And the technology is basically the same foundationally. What's changed is where the old voice recognition and or punch one for yes, two for no type of IVR systems are based on decision trees. Now we're utilizing some type of AI to make it more robust and more flexible. And I think that's the interesting question here, and it gets into this idea of, Ray, as you brought up, how can you be indistinguishable from a human, is as AI in all of its permutations increases in scale and efficiency, then this type of question of being able to, will we be able to engage in conversational dialogue with real humans between a robot and a human effectively and never know the difference, that's only going to get better. I don't know if you guys saw the recent press release from one of Elon Musk's companies. So they created a text analytics program that could effectively duplicate or fake writing to a point that it became scary. They decided that they couldn't release it publicly because the opportunity for abuse was just too much. That's another side of the same coin. So what that tells me is that the technology actually is at that point already. It's just not mature and rolled out across the board. But we have accomplished creating a AI-based system that can effectively duplicate human interactions from a tech standpoint. Now, what does that mean longer term in terms of the role of research and how does it replace surveys, et cetera, et cetera? That's a whole other question. But we know that text analytics and the big data analytics and all of those things are in demand. We know that from Grit, and we know that from just experience. We know that we need cheaper, faster, better research. So I would tend to agree that eventually we're going to get there where chatbots become one of the defining technology for how we collect and interact with other people. I don't think we're there yet. I think it's going to take another 5 years or so before we see the technology being good enough that it really can replace the current methods.
And the one caveat I would have in the systems I've used so far, and it reminds me a lot of some of the early initiatives with online data collection, particularly anything innovative, is that they don't actually produce nice data files. And that is something that's going to hold them back really fitting into larger companies, because they often the best they will do is a CSV. But that has lost so much of the metadata. You can't put it straight into R. You can't put it straight into your Python files. You can't put it into your Q or SPSS without some extra work on labeling things. So I think that needs to be a lot smoother and probably a lot more templated conversations.
Yeah.
So all you have to
how do you Zappify using these things, right?
Yeah. Okay, Lenny. So that was my pick for a topic. What have you brought along today in show and tell?
Well, a variation on the theme. Maybe with the idea of, obviously the automation ship has sailed. The ability to take various technologies, whether it's chatbots or templating, but to create highly efficient, scalable systems for both research and analytics. It was a trend that we saw building for years, and according to the most recent grit data, at least, it's no longer a building trend. It is the de facto reality, and possibly even the defining characteristic of the industry today. That old trifecta of quality, speed, and cost are the drivers of decision making, and it's really hard to talk about speed and cost in a competitive way without talking about automation. So if we accept that is true, that it is something that is only going to continue to redefine the industry from a process standpoint, from a methodological standpoint, then I think the big defining question then becomes, well, what does that mean for the role of researchers themselves? And I would posit that the implications there are even more profound. When a machine can determine what is the right process, what's the right sample size, what are the correct and appropriate analytical approaches to derive the needed answer for the business issue, that cuts out a whole bunch of humans out of the equation. Now, I think there's always human oversight on those things, but that leaves a great big-eyed question on when so much of the research service and human service business has been driven by methodology and by that type of consulting. When that's taken out of the equation, what does that leave us? And I think that takes us to a whole other type of consulting scenario. And we see that from the grit data as well. So we asked in the most recent one, the in-demand skills. And the top one was data analytics and data science. Next was storytelling and visualization. After that was sales and business knowledge, and rounding things out were critical thinking, strategy, and innovation. Questions around research design or methodological selection or statistical analysis, the way we tend to think of it in the research world, they just weren't part of the equation. Those were not the in-demand skills. So that paints a picture of a very different future. And I think that as an industry, we are yet to really wrap our hands around what that looks like. And that's going to be the big debate over the course of the next few years, is the role of the human in what is increasingly an automated research process. Prove me wrong.
So, Melanie, Lucy?
No, I don't think I would prove him wrong. I would support what he's suggesting. Automation is definitely going to be taking out some of the fingers of market research and forcing us to focus more on what the human mind can bring to the table. Not to say that the traditional skills of being a good researcher are going away, but you're going to be spending less and less time actually executing basic project work and basic, methodology work, and using that time more to broaden the research context, working more with data. My topic is going to be really related to this, and so it'll be a good segue. But I completely agree that things that don't actually add intellectual value to the process are being automated to add the speed, and then the buyers are looking for the people in the process to really bring more value to the table in the conversation, in the thinking, and in bringing additional data points into the conversation.
I would have thought, I completely agree, that this would all be a huge relief, because, surely the bits that are boring, the bits we don't want to do, and the interesting stuff, the context, the storytelling, and hopefully then delivering impacts, is something that people are much more interested in.
But how do you scale that? I mean,
Yeah.
building a business around where's the differentiation when it's just around thinking? So the idea of like black boxes methodologies go out the window, and that's so much of what's driven scale in the industry. I think that it has huge implications for creating scalable businesses in the market research industry.
It absolutely does, because actually, if you ultimately pursue that model and you go from an environment where really agencies controlled access to people from the point of view of data source, and clients had to buy into that, then you've totally thrown that out the window. The entire model is completely different. And in one sense, it's hugely democratized because it means that vast numbers of people can access data and get information. So you can look at a huge, expanded universe for research and insights. But at the same time, it means that those big agencies and the people who like to control that process are potentially, not going to be part of the equation anymore. And I think that is really, really super interesting.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing it play out, right? In the three biggest research companies in the world, or three of the top four, Nielsen is up for sale, and the only real attention seems to be being paid is to their data business, not their research business.
No.
GfK already went through the transformation where they sold off all of their research businesses, or most of them, to focus on its consulting component. Kantar just launched their own Zappy-like solution, and of course they're up for sale as well. So, we're seeing this massive transformation at the top end. How long before it eliminates a lot of the companies that were primarily focused on just data collection and methodology as their differentiator? That's not going to be there anymore. I mean, there could be a bloodbath in the research industry over the next few years, where a lot of companies simply drop out because they can't compete.
Okay, a couple of thoughts. The first is that we've had the bloodbath for many years. Something like 1 million.
Fair enough.
Something like 1 million people in the research industry have lost their job because of automation. So when I first joined, and it had already started by then, you had print rooms, you had people typing out the questionnaires. They'd go to the print room to print them. They would post them to the interviewers who lived all around the country. The interviewers would go and knock on the doors. They would then post those back to the central. They would double punch them in. All of those people have lost their jobs, other than a small handful who can work in social research. Then they lost their jobs because the automation of the telephone people coming in and making all those calls. Those people have lost their jobs too. Why there is so much concern now is it's people like us who are losing their jobs as opposed to other people. And of course, that is always something that catches one's eye. But it is a natural process. But I think we will see the end of a market research industry over the next 10 or 20 years, although we will still have a market research profession. If you look at data scientists, they are smeared right through most organizations. There'll be data scientists and programmers and developers in HR and in IT and in ops and so on. And I think we will be a skill set that will exist in lots and lots of different parts of the organization. Some of those will be in client side, some of those will be in consulting and providing, but we won't need large organizations whose ability is to be able to implement the same questionnaire in 50 countries. That's just not going to be needed in the future.
I have to disagree. I definitely see automation, but I see the world of data coming, but I see them working more symbiotically than that. And I see the continued need for survey data, but Dynata's journey is about rarely, if ever, delivering in the future a survey data only data set that'll be connected and integrated and matched and appended, but it's still going to have elements of survey to it, and understanding what questions to ask, when to ask them, understanding representativeness sampling, understanding consumer engagement and trust, and creating safe environments for them to share opinions. That's still going to take a lot of skill that researchers have. And, I've been in the industry quite a while now, and I've seen that researchers can be quite resilient. They can push themselves and broaden their skill set. I still do that every day. I stay marketable and I continue to push myself into new areas, as do my colleagues on this phone call. The reason you guys are still at the top of your careers is that you continue to evolve and push. Researchers all over our industry do that every day. So I see it a little differently. I see it as an evolution, and I see that we'll still need a lot of these same skills. We just have to get much wider in our skill sets.
But, Melanie, that's kind of what I mean by we will be a profession, but not an industry.
All right. I like that word.
We will have the thinking, we'll have the skills, we will take the side of the customer against the company. We'll take the side of evidence against emotion. That will be our role, but I don't think we will be organized into sort of the dark and light green Kantar label.
Can I ask a question of you clever technical people? How are new methodologies going to be developed and evolve without sort of human intervention making those kind of innovative connections? I understand that technology can be brought to bear, but how will we, I mean, if it comes to design of studies, how is automation going to evolve and develop with the design of studies, adopting new ideas and creating new methodologies?
It will allow... Okay, you first, Lenny.
Ray.
Okay.
Well, go ahead, please.
Two things. One is if you look at what it's done in other disciplines. So the ability to split the atoms came when we were able to automate the measuring processes and so on. So that enables the next level of thinking. When you've got more AI tools, you can start to look at some of the language, some of the stuff that's being done in comparative language studies and so on is helping us understand. You look at the neuroscience, again, it's the automation of being able to get the information that allows people to think beyond that. Now, the next step will build on the old automation with new thinking and will be terribly manual at first. So one of the biggest changes that happened in the research world was the introduction of hierarchical bays. And I can remember that coming in the late 80s and the early 90s, and it was incredibly manual. And it was really hard work, and it was a small bunch of Bayesian aficionados in academia developed it, and then it was picked up, and then it was automated. And that's how new stuff, it builds on the old. It is manual to start with when it's added to the mix, and if it's good, it becomes automated.
Yeah, and I think your question around, or at least what I took out of Lucy is what where's the role of defining a good methodology, right? The role of researchers in that. I mean, today, most of the innovations that we see happening in around the world of data collection and analysis, and I mean that in a very general way, not just market research companies, but across the board. Those are technologists who think that they've identified a problem and a better way to do it, often with very little insight into the industry that we work in. I mean, most of the companies that, for instance, that participate in the competition, the Insight Innovation Competition at IIX, I would say 70% of those don't come from the research industry.
Yeah.
It's actually a shock often. Oh, wait, what? There's an industry for this? What? I had no idea. So, I think that's just the nature of the beast. The best we can hope for is that, there's obviously some very wonky stuff that's come out of this type of innovation, and they need researchers to help determine what's good. But that will probably still mostly be our role, is partnering with technologists to figure out better ways to do things. But it'll be the technologists that are driving the bus.
So, Melanie, you had some thoughts about people and skills.
Yeah, it's very related to this. And so, as we talked about, using Dynata as an example, we're certainly broadening our borders in terms of the vision of what the company will be. And if you followed us at all, you know that we're headlong into the world of first-party data and becoming, a data firm. So if you look at the companies that are transforming or starting up in our industry, they're all mostly chasing one of two visions. One is this automation journey, and the other is, a data journey. And in a world of GDPR and permission-based data, having the rights and authority to use data in a permission-based, private, and secure way is king. And so we're pressing hard into this integrated, matched, appended data world. And with that is coming a much broader set of skills that we look for when we hire. And I want to say again that to us, the traditional skills are not going away. Someone still needs to be able to have the soft skills and the business skills, the basic analytic skills, and be a good researcher, understanding research theory, sampling theory, and bias, and then storytelling skills. They still need those skills to succeed in the business, but the MVP also has a really good grasp of math and algorithms. These are some of the newer skills that we're looking for: algorithmic expertise to undergird some of this automation, and as we automate, to actually build intelligence and research acumen into the automation, to be able to read and write and interpret algorithms and to iterate. And then data skills, not just like analytics, but architecture, types of data, first, second, third party data librarians, understanding data permissions, how to fuse data and integrate it, and how to do A/B testing in a data world as opposed to working with people, how to actually construct A/B and models in a data world. So that's the second area, is data. The third area where we see emerging skills is in technology, around cookies and SaaS tools, AI, machine learning, coding. Some of our best people are really great researchers, but they can also write a quick script in order to automate something themselves. They really understand cookies and how the tags work and pixels. And and that's very important in our new digital space. And then finally, just cyber skills, understanding security, understanding end links, and understanding how to pass things in encrypted ways, understanding fraud detection, really understanding privacy. So as we move down this journey, we're looking, many of you have heard me talk about the letter T, and a good researcher needs to be great across a broad range of things, but also a deep expert in something. And that's been the model that we've always followed. And I still think that that's true, but the T is sort of in a much bigger, bolder font now. The amount of stuff that you have to be good at is wider and deeper, and you have to go a little further. And then the leg of the T, it actually has to be wider as well. The really great people keep all these traditional skills and apply them while also picking up math and data and architecture and technology and cyber skills. So those are the MVPs that we're looking for as we grow our business. Are you guys seeing the same thing? How are you experiencing that in your worlds?
Well, the main concern I have, because I think we need the same people, but we need to recruit them, and then we need to develop them. And Sue York and I did quite a large survey of training. And it turned out that nearly 2/3 of the people in our industry get less than 2 days training a year. And our industry is supposed to be about adding value just to numbers. So we're going to use those machines, and then we're going to use our super smart people to add value. Well, if we've got super smart people and we don't train them, they won't stay in the industry, and they certainly won't stay super smart. So I think that is one challenge. How are we going to really prioritize skill development? But the second that worries me, particularly when we start to talk about the data sciences and so on, is there are too few of these people out there, and our industry isn't sufficiently sexy at the moment. We need to make it a more appealing and more attractive option for people to pick, rather than saying, you know what, I want to go to Berlin and I want to develop a new game app. And we want to say, no, you really want to be able to understand how to make the future of brand choices.
I would second that, although I don't think we're as unsexy as everybody thinks we are. I think as soon as you get a chance to talk to young people, and I've done quite a lot of going to universities and colleges and talking about insights and the industry, people are super excited about it. I think we have an awareness problem. It's a bit like Lenny was saying earlier about the tech companies who didn't know that kind of we existed as an industry, and they come along and find it out at an IIEX and like, wow, you know, I genuinely think that it's a great industry if we can just spread the word about it. And when we do, people are super interested in it because it's a wonderful career and it's obviously extremely future oriented. But to go back to what Melanie was saying, and also to an extent to what you were saying, Ray, I mean, how much of these types of individuals are being, and how much is this type of development in terms of the role being done within clients, and how much is it being done within, you know, agencies or suppliers? Because I think a lot more of it seems to be going in-house, and I actually think clients are better at training and clients are better at development, and they're also better at finding people because people want to go and work for a company like Coca-Cola, whereas they haven't even heard of, you know, GFK. So those are my questions.
Well, so
I think there's a.
Go ahead,
Mel.
That's fine.
I think that's a great point, Lucy. And again, just looking at the data that we have, at least from Grit, I don't have it right in front of me, but I believe one of the things we found is if we look at those numbers of hiring skills, for instance, under business strategy, kind of those soft skills, those research skills, or those consulting skills, there's a higher demand for that within client-side organizations. They want people to be who understand the business and the business issues, where the analytical components, I think, is much higher demand on the supplier side, which makes perfect sense, especially when you think of the outline that Mel made. I mean, that's where the world is going, no doubt. So I think there's going to be a divergence to an extent, where the need for methodologists or even for technologists on the client side will not be as strong, because that's why the supplier side exists, right? That's our job. That's our we are there to help support those types of things. But it is really difficult to attract that talent when we've got Silicon Valley out there. So I would say there are cultural issues within our industry, or systemic issues, that we need to deal with. When you have developers and smart young data scientists or polymaths being attracted to Silicon Valley, one, because they get equity, two, they get great benefits, and three, they can generally get paid better. That's really challenging. I've said for years, one of the big issues for the market research industry to make this transformation into more of a technology-driven business from an acquisition standpoint is that existing market research companies that can provide scale can't afford to buy the tech companies.
Yeah, no.
They're not going to pay the multiples.
No.
So there, I don't know how to address that issue, right? It is systemic at this point. You have private equity-backed companies that are supporting the largest businesses in the world. They're not going to pay a 15 to 20x multiplier for a tech business that also has this type of talent because they were built as a tech business. It just isn't going to happen. That's why we saw the scale of a deal like Qualtrics and SAP. We're not going to see that again anytime soon, because the natural buyers in our industry don't exist to do it. They don't have the pockets.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a challenge to make that transformation across the board. And another thing I think is an issue is that most of the Masters of Market Research programs that we have, they don't tackle these topics.
No.
Yeah.
They're not teaching these things.
Yeah.
I agree with you. That was going to be my parting comment. We're growing these types of people ourselves, the smartest and the brightest in the organization. We're growing their skills and they're enjoying the journey, and being able to do more and add more skills to their resume. But we're having to do that because, you don't find this type of talent coming out of the universities today that are good across the board. They're really siloed in some of their curriculum, and then they don't. I personally see that some of the universities aren't keeping up with where the research space is going from a couple years ago, much less where it's going to be in a couple years. And so that would be my biggest concern is figuring out how to grow these programs at the university level so that you get people into the space that I agree is quite sexy and exciting to the right set of people, but have them come out of those programs with the right skill sets to be able to deliver value within the first 2 years.
So, Lucy, you've got a slight pivot now on the human angle.
Absolutely. I mean, when I was asked to think about this subject, I kind of looked more broadly, and I was listening to the radio this morning, actually, and I heard the neuroscientist Gina Rippon, and she was talking essentially about the fact that there was no difference between men's and women's brains. And that kind of got me thinking about the fact that, the broader trends we're living in at the moment are really the Me Too and Black Lives Matter, and I think it's really interesting to see how these are affecting the research and insights industry. I mean, we've seen kind of a broader understanding around gender and sexuality, and that's obviously becoming more fluid. So obviously people are questioning previous conventions, and it's no longer a kind of a binary thing. Apparently in Germany, they've approved an official intersex gender option on official forms. And I think the Scottish government is proposing to expand the answer options so you don't have to have a binary sex question. You can answer in different ways on the next census. And then, of course, I was thinking about the fact that brands are also kind of ditching their reliance on gender binaries, as we've seen recently. I'm hoping the era of pink Bics and stuff is over. ASOS has launched a unisex clothing line, and Kleenex has stopped talking about men's-sized tissues. And obviously, we've then seen Nike last year and Gillette more recently. So they're talking about, becoming real social or gender activists. So that's quite interesting. And then within the industry, we've seen things like, obviously, the huge popularity of something like Women in Research, which has done an amazing, 10-year run of really helping women with developing their careers and getting them together. And we've got the new speakers track stuff that Annie does, Annie Pettit has been doing, and that's really empowered women and also increased diversity on platforms within the industry. But all that is in the context of the fact that 2% of VC funding goes to women-run businesses. That's 2%. And obviously, we still know we don't have equal pay, and that's an ongoing problem. So I feel like within the industry, we're not in a position to really understand our audiences unless we reflect them in terms of our companies and the way that we're going about our research. So what I came down to was the fact that I think there's a big tension between, encouraging and supporting diversity so that we can understand the audiences we're trying to measure and connect with. And of course, the core function of market research, which is classification and effectively putting people in boxes and using demographics to target and segment audiences. And I understand that we've made great strides to listen better, and technology has really helped this. So we've got much more nuanced ways of understanding people, and that could be sort of qual at scale, and big data sets, doing text analysis, and letting people make choices rather than telling them they have to fit in a certain place. So we don't have to rely on box ticking. I don't know, do we? I mean, do we expand the boxes in relation to things like race, gender, age, sexuality, other differences, or do we actually just get rid of the boxes? So really, that's almost more of a question. But do we have ways of listening to and grouping people that avoid traditional classifications now? So over to you guys.
So I'll start. I definitely think that, when I was talking about broadening skill set, I was really specific about sort of the technical talent, but I also think that there is a real need for organizations like ours to make sure that we're really diverse in our thinking and really diverse in the way we approach research. So I love that, and making sure that we have real cultural experts and ethnographers in our team to help us interact with the world better. So I love that part. And I'll let other people comment more on that. On the concept of boxes or not boxes, the one thing I would remind everyone is, while we need to make sure that we ask people questions in ways that make them want to answer us, they don't want a bunch of open ends. And so if we start going away from boxes, we have to use the automation and maybe some of the chat bots that we talked about earlier to figure out how to get that back into a way that they're not having to constantly type in things into their devices, the use of voice. So I agree that we need to broaden the way we engage people and put questions in front of them that they are happy to answer. But we have to do so in a wise way that doesn't make it too onerous on them or on the data analytics in the background.
What do you think, guys?
Well, I think the box fitting has always been a compromise, which used to be because that's what you could do with the information. You could buy media against the boxes. You could buy young, under such as age men, buy this media, so you could buy advertising against it. But you look around yourself at who goes to Glastonbury Plot Festival. It's the whole age range. There are so many things now where the age ranges doing it are so different. And so many people, we've got such a high divorce rate in the Western world these days, that the question of what is your family structure? Well, 4 nights a week, we're a family of 5. 1 night a week, we're a family of 2. And 1 night a week, we're a family of 4. These things change now. So we need to get a head around that. We certainly need, on the other side, coming back very much to what Melanie was just saying, if we want to understand people, we need to have a much bigger variety. And yeah, why I've done a fantastic job with gender, still more to do. But there are very, very few people of color, as you'd say, the American expression. I can't remember the last time I saw somebody in a wheelchair present at a market research conference, or somebody who was visually impaired, and these sort of things. We draw from a very narrow pool in terms of our professionals, and then we draw from an even narrower pool in terms of the people who run the industry. And I think that if we want to have a much more exciting future, we need to draw on a much wider range of talents to do that.
I have tried like crazy to convince my oldest daughter, who has a bachelor's in anthropology, to come into the research industry. Now, that may be doomed simply because she's my daughter, and the fact that I'm trying to do that is automatically makes it a no. But yeah, the reality is still, regardless whether it's just because no, Dad, I'm not going to work in the family business, or what other reason, she has no interest. What does motivate her, and I just use this as an example, is an idea of making a difference in the world, right? So, I mean, she's typical 23-year-old. She's filled with the desire to make change happen in the world, and I think that's an important consideration here. If I assume that she's fairly typical of other folks of her generation, and I think that she is, that meaning. That sense of purpose, of creating impact, I think that is a generational characteristic, and we need to find a way to communicate that. And it kind of dovetails into your other point, Lucy. She sees she's very woke. I don't know a better way to say it. She doesn't see the world through boxes at all.
No, that's the thing, and this is my experience with my daughters who are a similar age. One is 21, and yes, she absolutely doesn't see the world in that categorized way that I think maybe we historically have done. But I think that there's a huge number of stories which we could be sharing with that generation. In particular, some of the stuff that we see through the SMR Foundation, stories about how simply by doing some really good on-the-ground qualitative research, they're able to understand, period poverty in different markets in Africa, stopping girls going to school, and by helping, with specific interventions, managing to increase the population of girls in school full-time significantly. And that's the kind of stuff that your daughter would probably really love to know about. And that's kind of, exactly where insight and research can come in and really, really significantly help people's lives. And I don't think we shout about that stuff nearly enough. In fact, I mean, at the SMR Congress, last September in Berlin, when they were presenting these wonderful stories about the way that research and insight had really significantly, I mean, it has saved lives, saved babies' lives in one area of India. And there were very few people in the room. They were all in the tech track. They were all next door listening to robots, how robots, did this and how data lakes did that, and, what the new algorithm's about. But actually that stuff, those stories are the ones that our children will really engage with. And those are the ones we need to be sharing and talking about, in my humble opinion.
Okay, I've got my eye on the clock, so we need to start taking questions from the floor. We've got some already, and I'm going to take them out of sequence to bring them back into conversation, because the last one we received is on this topic. So let's take that one first. Comment to the panel surrounding demographic boxes. It's probably a matter of determining which demographics are relevant in today's world and then designing questions to reflect those realities. So Lucy or Mel, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I agree with that. That's what I was trying to say, but I think that was said better. My point is, I don't think we need to go to, maybe I was being a bit too pragmatic in my answer, but we don't need to go to no boxes and getting a bunch of open-ended, because people don't even like that sort of style of having to give answers. But to find the right questions with the right answers, and then let the technology on the background do the work in terms of creating the segments that you would analyze. So I completely agree with that. What are the right classifications and the right questions to ask people, and the right way to look at the population and segments of the population would be a great exercise for our industry.
Absolutely. But I mean, it'd be really interesting, because surely it must vary so much according to the actual business issue you've got at hand. And so the population you're looking at, you might want to ask which group they fall into in any number of different ways, and that actually is going to make it hugely complex. And I don't know if that can be automated. I don't know. Lenny?
Well, I mean, I'm sure my belief is everything can be automated to an extent, but I think there's a bigger challenge there that I think of just from a transition standpoint, and that is, at least in North America, the standard view of the population is through the census.
Census, yep.
So how do we map evolving new ways to look at the world in populations, but still be able to link them back to these foundational data sets that just are, this is data currency, right? They're simply, our industry is built off of referencing these data sets as the standards.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of work that has to be done there. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Mel.
Yeah, we've struggled with that at Dynata. We do a lot of work that is quoted and structured to match the census data. And so as we've tried to expand even the basic gender question or sex question, it's very difficult now to push those into the right quotas to be representative, because there's no benchmark for what they should be. So it's a really good point.
Okay, so we have one now which is probably more in your wheelhouse, Lenny. Is the buy-in to the market research industry becoming harder for somebody launching into MR as a solo practitioner? It feels like you don't just need a computer and a Microsoft suite, but you need cutting-edge tools to compete, and they can be expensive. How does one bridge the gap without a massive investment before you even have one client?
No, I would say it's actually probably the opposite. I mean, so many of the tools, the platforms that are available today are not traditional licensing models. Many of them are pay-as-you-go, and many of them have freemium versions. So I think it's actually easier for a sole practitioner to launch a research-focused practice with a wide variety of tools and partners available to them at no upfront costs. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, I would very much agree. I would advise people to have a look at Mike Stevens' Insight Platforms website. Yes. If you Google that, you'll see a massive number. One of the really interesting changes is that some of the tools that I can't afford to buy for a whole year because I don't use them enough, you can buy a 1 month usage. So some of them is per case, some is, oh, I'll buy it for 1 month and I'll use it. However, from a business startup point of view, I would say get one client, start your business, not start your business, get one client. Would be the right way.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say for sure as well. The best advice I ever got was, if you're going to start a business, get your client first, and then build around that vision of what you think are the latent needs you're going to meet. But I also agree that you can you probably can't enter the business as a true solo practitioner anymore and think that as a true solo practitioner you're going to be able to solve a big business problem. You're going to need a village of tools and people around you to help you. You can still do it, but you're less likely to be able to do that alone in today's world.
Yeah, and there are networks of solo practitioners that have banded together to do that. Here in the U.S., Missouri comes to mind. Which is basically a consortium of solo practitioners who banded together for buying power, right, and efficiencies that way. And I've built several businesses in the past that were basically the same idea.
Exactly, and I see that there's the independent consultants group in the UK, which does have a very much that kind of bonded network where you might be a specialist in one thing and you find a specialist in another thing and you team together on one project, and then you might go your different ways. That, I think, is very much the way it's going.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's really interesting comment here from somebody who's saying that in addition to buying a 1 month license for SPSS, they can also hire an SPSS specialist on an hourly rate for the project. And we're seeing more and more of these specialists cropping up. So business getters, data analysts, ethnographers, semioticians available to hire, which is kind of what you were saying as well a moment ago in terms of networks. So there's certainly a lot more.
I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Savio. We built that on Greenbook to be that gig economy platform, to find those people, to engage with them, because we saw this happening as an outcome of automation, that there would be a greater demand for individual practitioners with different skill sets to contribute to projects where the bulk of the work was being done via automation.
And there's a great comment here, which probably 2 or 3 of us could pick up on. Somebody asking, be good if we publish more information on these consortia, or in North America, consortiums, and on the sort of independent consultants groups and things like that. So I will take that on board. But actually, if you're the person who made the suggestion, please email Lenny and myself, and Lucy may well be able to do something too. And we will try to make sure that some of this gets more widely publicized.
Absolutely. Although you gave a shout out to Mike Stevens, and Mike actually does have a category on his site of these talent marketplaces. Yeah. So there are a few.
Yeah.
But there are more people who are not currently connected to them than are connected. Yes. So the more that these can be promoted, the better it will be. Okay, jumping to a completely different question, and this was put in nearly an hour ago, so apologies for that. Have there been any studies conducted about the satisfaction with chatbots and how that might impact their usage in a research environment? Yes, but I'm going to give the caveat that I always give about companies who do a side-by-side test. The ones that are published are favorable. So you will not get a neuroscience company publishing a paper that says our neuroscience wasn't quite as good. You won't get a chatbot company who will publish a paper who says it's not as good.
Well, Ray and Mel, sounds like we have a new topic for Grit this year.
Oh, I think chatbots needs to be a really big feature in Grit, particularly people who've used them and what have they got back. So we've run one test project. I've been looking at the data from some others. And as I say, one of the factors that comes out, it alienates a minority of people. You do get more information from some people. But you've got this terrible, terrible dilemma that any new technique, whether it's gamification or neuroscience, is always challenged. We want to say it's better, and then somebody says, "What do you mean it's different?" "Oh no, it's not different." "Well, if it's not different, how is it better?" And And that becomes quite an interesting point. Now, one of the things that people are showing evidence of in chatbots is that the acceptance by the participants is higher. The typical survey length is longer, and the happiness with the survey is higher on average, but not for everybody. So if we have any other questions, you'll need to fire them in the next 2 to 3 minutes. Otherwise, we will run around the panel for our closing thoughts of other things we expect to see this year, or the key driving thoughts. And we will run through that list. Melanie, Lucy, Lenny, and then myself. Okay, any more comments on the Qualtrics deal and its impact on the industry? I'll do one, and then I'm sure others will want to join in. 2, I can't fully understand the valuation, and I've not heard a good explanation for the valuation. But what it has done is made several other companies who are looking to sell get a bit too greedy because they think this sort of money is out there. And I suspect, as Lenny said a little earlier, they're wrong. So Lenny, your thoughts?
So the valuation was driven by data synthesis. So they want to do what Mel says Dynata is doing by connecting business intelligence data with individual level CRM data and then expanding that out. That's the value. That's the big bet, is that data synthesis model will be able to deliver greater business insight and impact. So that's where that came from. An interesting thing is that I would fully expect actually to see, so there was a little bit of bait and switch action going on behind the scenes there. It came between SAP and Salesforce. And you may have noticed that Salesforce, as soon as that deal happened, they invested heavily in SurveyMonkey. And now SurveyMonkey is integrating heavily with Microsoft. So we're seeing these two powerhouses emerge of SAP and Qualtrics, and then Salesforce and SurveyMonkey. It wouldn't surprise me if, to make it all said and done, if Salesforce bought SAP, and then we just have one great big ass linkage of data across the board, or Microsoft. One of them will probably make a play. So that's my prediction.
Yeah, I was going to say that in every data set there are outliers, and right now I think the industry is seeing the valuation of the Qualtrics deal as a bit of an outlier. Great for them, great, good company, neat business deal, but seems like an outlier in terms of the valuation. Either that, or there are these pieces at play that we can't quite see and that we'll see in the coming years.
I think, it seems to me like a massive curveball. I think that might be what Simon Chadwick wrote in his piece, which was, I think, the most popular piece on Green Book last year. With SAP, Qualtrics, what were they thinking?
But in the world of GDPR, they had to have this linkage. Think about it. So it's the only way. CRM data, there's already an existing business relationship with the consumer. So it provides an automatic linkage to create those data graph models. I think it was very smart.
Yeah, you could have bought any of the big data platforms for that sort of money. In fact, you probably could have bought several of them.
I was going to say,
not with that many enterprise clients.
No.
Qualtrics is a much bigger deal than anybody really realizes. They have done a phenomenal job of building their business with clients. It was a smart play.
We shall see. And one, we've got that comment there. So let's just run around the table for closing thoughts about other things to keep our eye on this year. And I forgot what order I was going to say. So let's go with Lucy.
Well, this is a curveball to me because I hadn't really given it any thought. I think it's very interesting having this conversation with you guys because you're all much more plugged into technology, and I'm probably much more plugged into storytelling and communication. And in my book, I think what's going to happen is people are going to get much better this year at sailing on their data lakes, if you like. Everyone's putting it together, everyone's doing integration, everyone's getting their platforms, but it's actually getting the impact from that platform and getting people to engage with it. So that's my big thing to watch coming up over the next year or so.
And Melanie?
Yeah, I would say that sort of tied to what I was talking about earlier, that the privacy and permission-based data world is going to really continue to evolve, and globally there's going to be some additional legislation that's going to come through, but that provides a real opportunity for the research community if we lean into it to be very involved in enabling connected and permission-based data and being experts at how to bring that data across marketing levers for a large organization. So we see it as a real, as something to stay very, very close to, but also as a huge opportunity.
And Lenny?
I'm going with Mel on this. As Mel knows better than most, I've bet a significant amount of personal, financial, and brand equity in that idea. I think that the idea of data sovereignty in some form or fashion, combined with privacy compliance on a global basis, will redefine not just our industry but also marketing. And we are in a unique position as an industry to be at the forefront and center of that if we play our cards right. And there's lots of ways to get there. It's thrilling to see Dynata doing what they're doing. Is probably the biggest leader in that space, because it's great validation for all the other ideas that are out there, right? We'll see which ones gain traction overall, but it's unequivocal that that'll redefine everything as we go.
And I'm going to be cheeky as a final moderator and take two, a possible and a definite. The possible is the economy. We are looking at 2019. It could be a bad year, maybe about a 30% chance. And if it's a bad year, it's going to hammer market research really hard and the insights, and we're going to see those training budgets dip instead of increase, marketing budgets dip. So everybody needs a plan B for this year, I think, because obviously there's also a good chance that we won't have a recession, that the economy will tick along. So you have to believe and march bravely forward, but have a plan B in your mind, I feel. And then the second one, which is definite, is this is going to be about curation this year. There is too much stuff for anybody to read, for anybody to know. The comment we had earlier about networks of consultancies, that is a kind of curation. I think we're going to see quite a change in the way that information is distilled within the industry, shared and focused, because there is just so much oversupply of so much stuff now. That'd be quite interesting. So thank you so much, Lenny, Melanie, and Lucy. Thank you, everybody who asked the questions, and all of those of you who stayed on the line listening to us. The recording will be available shortly for those who want to listen again or refer it to their colleagues.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. It was really interesting. Thanks, guys.
And thank you very much for today.